In this tutorial, we're going to talk about the client pages of Agency Boss. We're also going to take a look at the retainer and also the prospects feature. So what we're looking at here now is the active clients page. And when you log in, you will first come to this page. I'll note that we have privacy mode turned on, so the data that you're seeing now is the real data from my agency. However, because privacy mode is turned on, it hides the real client names and company names and the personal information. But in terms of the numbers, it is the figures from my agency. Now, going to the first elements in this bar here, the first thing we see is the active balances. So if we hover over the info icon here, we see that the active balances is the sum of all non-negative balances for active clients. So what this is it's basically showing you all of the money that you're holding for your client, for your active client. We also have to the right here, active plus inactive balances. A lot of times your clients, will be active, but then maybe they go on vacation for a few weeks, in which case you might move them to the inactive state. However, you're still holding their money and they might become an active client again at any time. So you just want to be really aware of these figures because you need to keep this amount of money in your bank account because you need to pay it to your resources in order to render all the services, regardless if you're a software agency, creative agency, or SEO agency. It's letting you know the funds that you're holding for your clients, so you can make sure you keep that available to pay salaries. Okay. The third element here just shows you the number of active clients at a glance. YTD revenue is very straightforward. It's the this is based on the work logs, so it's the amount that you've charged your clients so far this year. For an hourly agency, that would be it'd be the number of hours worked times the rate for your individual resources. Finally, we have the gross margin for the year. This is the difference between what you pay your resources and what you charge the clients. So early in the year here, we had we had high margin on some of the work, but uh, more normally this is closer to 60%. So that means there's usually about a 60% profit margin on the resources here. Of course, I have overhead. I need to pay admin staff, bookkeepers, Amazon Web Servers, various other costs throughout the agency. But what we show here is we just show the margin between your resource cost and what you charge the client. And I think it's you always want to pay attention to this rate, and then also try to improve it over time. Okay, if we go into the rows here, the first column is last active. If we hover over this, it actually gives you a quick glance at what activity happened on that date. So we can see on August 19, Troy worked 4.13 hours, Tori on 1.5 hours. Just gives you some very quick information here. One thing to note is you can double click on these rows and they'll go yellow like this. We often use this double clicking, just when we're having internal meetings, talking about our clients. We do something called a sweep every day in our agency, me and the other admin staff, where we simply go through all of the clients one by one and we talk about if there's any problems there, see if there's anything to talk about there. If the balances get low, if the retainer balance gets low down to like 280, we will send them a payment request, essentially just emailing them, reminding them to top up their retainer. In my agency, once the balance goes down to zero, the development will stop. However, I do make some exceptions for some certain reputable clients where I let them run negative balance. But that's because I'm fairly certain that I will get paid. So you can always make exceptions and let your clients run negative balances. But in general, when a retainer balance hits zero here, the development will be paused. Clients run negative balances. But in general, when a retainer balance hits zero here, the development will be paused. We have the client name, the contact person for that client. Um, this is optional, but you can optionally store the project manager or specify a project manager for each of the clients here. In our company, I will assign a project manager to each client. In some cases, it's an active project management role. In other cases, it's what it's more of a passive role. It's more of an observer role because the client has their own project manager. So in that case, when they're doing passive project management or just sort of observing, they're really just maintaining client relations and supervising the resources there, making sure things are going well. But I do like to essentially the way I use the project manager column is just a point person for each project, someone who I can quickly reach out to and ask questions about the state of the project. We have the retainer balance here. If we click on this arrow here, it's going to open the retainer in a new tab, and we're gonna talk about this soon. So I'll just leave this open. The next column is the year-to-date revenue. Very straightforward. It's based on the work logs. We're going to talk more about work logs in a future video. We have the threshold. The threshold is we'll usually either pause development around this point, or we will we'll be reminding for payment, but it's optional to use this column. We have the email of the client, phone number, address if it's available. The payment method is also optional to input this. It's just a reminder to you and your admin staff what is the preferred payment method for the client. So when you send your payment reminders, you can specify that method in the email. You can optionally log the logging method. So within Agency Boss, there is a way to log. However, there's also other methods to log. You can see down here Upwork. We are active on Upwork, and we also do a lot of the Agency Boss logging. And you can also add other ones like Hubstaff. You can add custom login methods. You can add custom payment methods. That's within the settings portion of Agency Boss, which we'll also talk about in a separate video. You can optionally put the start time. This sets a start time for your team to remind you within the agency start time when the work should begin. So within each instance of Agency Boss, and it will be the same for yours if you have an instance here, you will set the time zone for your agency. So in our case, the time zone of the agency is the Philippines time. That's because the majority of the staff here are from the Philippines. So here we know when we see 9 a.m., this is 9 a.m. Philippines time. The team should begin work here. And then you can add some arbitrary notes there. So that's pretty much the active clients here. Let's go to the retainer now because the retainer is very related to the to the clients page. So the retainer is a little bit of a separate feature from the rest of Agency Boss. It's disconnected. You don't need to log into it. You can copy the retainer link and send to your clients, and it has a secure URL, and they can log in there. They can view the retainer at any time. Your client can export to Excel, CSV, or PDF. This logo in the top right, you can customize this. You can upload your own logo there as long as it's square. Some basic information here about the retainer. And then finally, we have the tabular data of the retainer. We start with the project name. It should be noted that a client has many projects within Agency Boss. So your resources will log to a project as opposed to logging to a client. So we do track that they log to a project. And what this does is if your client has multiple projects going with you, which is very possible, they might ask you, you know, how much did they spend on project A? How much did they spend on project B? So because your resources log to a project, they will have access to that information. They can also export it in the Excel. So they will know how much they spent for each project. The date that the logging happened, the resource that logged, a description of the work they did. Here in my agency, I have them enter the end of day update here. So an end of day update in Winterwind is it's a list of the accomplishments uh, that the resource had for that day. And then they will just paste that in there for their description of work done. And you can click this to copy to the clipboard if you want. The hours they worked, the client rate, the total spend for the client on that day, and then the time they logged. So this is an example of a retainer. There's about 28 active clients in my agency. All of them like this system. I never had any complaints about it. Okay, so that's the retainer. The next thing we're going to talk about is we have 3 different states for clients, and it's also the same for prospects and for resources. We have 3 different states, and those states are active, inactive, and deleted. So we do something called a sweep every morning where we go through all of our active clients and we simply talk about them, especially talking about if there's any problems there and addressing those. However, for example, if your client goes on vacation or they just want to pause development for a while, you can move them to inactive. So the way you do that, by the way, you can just grab this table to move it around. So the way to move a client to inactive is simply to select them here, or you can select multiple ones. And then you'll go to the action drop down in the top right, and you'll go move to inactive. Okay, that will move them to inactive, and just you just won't have to see them every day. When it's not necessary because they're not active. So let's hop over to the inactive tab here. So here's all your inactive clients. Let's say one of them comes back from vacation. Well, you can just simply click there, go to the drop down, and move them back to active. We have a partial search on all of the pages. So if I type CO, it will just show the clients with CO in the name. And then finally, we have the deleted section for the clients, the resources, etc. You will use the deleted one sometimes. This could be, for example, if you had a falling out with a client or you're never going to want to work with them again. You can move them to deleted, which is essentially like a purgatory for them. However, you maintain the data, you maintain the financial data within Agency Boss, the earnings, all of that. So nothing is ever hard deleted in this system. If you want to delete a client or a resource, it goes to the deleted section. Nothing's ever hard deleted, and that's because this is a accounting system in some ways. So we don't want to delete that financial data. There's many features in here. It shows your earnings over time and past earnings. So you would never want to delete an old client and the related financial data because you want to see the full earnings history in the charts and whatnot. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to pop over to the active prospects. So this is your sales prospects. They're people that you're talking with about doing work with your company, but they didn't agree yet. So you're still in talks with them. So you can create them as a prospect. So for example, if I click here, add prospect, you can enter their information. The add client page is very similar. You can put in their time zone. Every client or prospect, you can enter their own currency, and this will be the currency used in the retainer. So for example, if you have an Australian client, they probably will want to see their retainer in Australian dollars. That's what they pay taxes in. And if you use a service like Payoneer, you can easily have Australian bank account, which they can pay to. So Agency Boss supports multiple currencies. You can have clients from around the world, and you can have retainers in multiple currencies. It's all supported within this system. I think that's just about everything I'd like to talk about for this initial video. Oh, one last thing we can do is we can view the client. So if we click on the client here, this is the View Client page, and you can quickly see information about the client. If we scroll down here, this is custom information. You can store custom information on the clients. Within the settings section, you can add custom fields to store here. We have all of the projects associated with the client, the earnings for this year, the earnings for last year, so you can do a comparison on that. And then down here, the revenue information for each year. So you'd store this basic information here, but in this other information section, you can add custom fields here within the settings section. I'll probably cover that in a separate video, but if we quickly jump over to settings here, here we have client and client settings, and you can add custom fields here. These are the fields there are now. I can click add custom field, and we could put in hair color, for example. And now you have a custom field. You can enter this data when adding a client, when editing a client. So let's quickly jump back, and we'll look at the last thing, which is editing a client. So click here and edit. And you can see we can edit all of this information here. Okay, including custom information. So that's all I'm going to cover here. Thank you, and see you in the next tutorial.